I want to welcome all members and witnesses to today's hearing. I know that we have held two similar hearings this year, but I want to remind participants of some items to ensure that we have as smooth and engaging a presentation as possible. First, if you are experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so those issues can be resolved immediately. To ensure our members and participants today can have robust engagement, I ask members participating remotely to continue to remain visible on camera for the duration of their participation in the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. We have a lot of participants and members in this hearing today, so I will follow the House Committee on Veterans Affairs policy that members remain muted when not recognized, just like turning on your microphone or turning your microphone off during an in-person hearing. This is out of courtesy to all members on the committee, our witnesses and guests, so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. Now, as previously noticed, we will recognize members in two groups today. First, in order of seniority, we will recognize members from both chambers who were present before the gavel. Second, also in order of seniority, we will recognize members who were present after the gavel. Questions will alternate between chambers and between the majority and minority members present. Finally, members will be recognized for 3 minutes during each panel. Today, we'll be using a virtual timer to keep time. And to keep the timer in your view, select grid or focus view. Move your mouse over the second thumbnail from the right and click on the white circle and select lock participant. And from the list of participants, choose hearing timer. This will keep the timer in your view. When you are recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking so that your words are captured on the live stream. Now, if you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. That's veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Now, does any member have a question about the procedures for this hearing? I hear none and I see none, so we'll proceed. So I will start with my opening statement. Well, welcome everyone to the joint hearing of the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs to receive the legislative presentations of Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, or VFW, and multiple additional veteran service organizations. It is my honor to join all of the members to hear directly from the veteran service organizations that represent millions of veterans, their families, and surviving spouses. And I would like to welcome all VFW members and members of the VFW Auxiliary who have joined us today. We will hear VFW's testimony on our first panel. I also would like to welcome American Veterans, or AMVETS, the Fleet Reserve Association, Gold Star Wives of America, the National Congress of American Indians, and the National Association for Black Veterans. We will hear from all of these organizations on today's second panel. I especially want to welcome NCAI and NABVETS, who will be testifying for the very first time at our yearly legislative presentations. Inviting groups that specifically advocate for minority and underserved veterans is a crucial first step toward our goal of creating a more welcoming VA for all veterans. I would also like to specifically welcome any members from my home state of California. Normally, of course, we're in a big hearing room here in Washington, and all of the veterans from California would stand up and cheer, but that's not possible. So I'm going to have in my imagination that that's what's happening at this moment. We may not be in the same room as in years past due to the ongoing pandemic, but I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today virtually. The opportunity to hear from our VSOs is incredibly important to me. You represent veterans, their families, and survivors at all stages of life and service. Getting to hear from all of you provides the committees the opportunities to hear directly from you about your priorities and how we can best serve our nation's veterans. We secured several important wins for veterans last Congress, including passing the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, the Commander Hannon Act, and the Veterans Compact Act. And I'm very proud of these accomplishments, and we could not have achieved them without you being the veteran service organizations that serve our nation's veterans. But we can't stop with our accomplishments of the 116th Congress. We plan to build on those accomplishments and continue our work for veterans in the 117th Congress and beyond. Last week, the House passed the VA Vaccine Act, which was the effort of many weeks of work with VA to address a critical issue. I was concerned that VA was literally turning away veterans who were seeking a vaccine because they made too much money to be enrolled. A World War II veteran was turned away at the Detroit VMAC for this very reason. And I was very pleased that our committee was able to work in a bipartisan fashion to advance a needed fix to this problem, passing our bill within a week of introduction and with the support of 53 co-sponsors and endorsement of 8 veteran service organizations. And I want to thank Ranking Member Bost, a former Marine. Well, actually, as I understand it, once you're a Marine, you're never a former Marine. You're always a Marine for life. Thank you, Ranking Member Bost, and Chairman Tester for working with me on this. Getting shots into the arms as quickly as possible is the most important thing before us, and I want to thank the VFW and other VSOs for their support of this effort and for making it a priority. Reading your testimony is clear that we share many of the same priorities. My committee's top priorities for this Congress include creating a more welcoming VA and building equity for veterans, reducing veteran suicide, addressing toxic exposure, ensuring student veterans receive quality education, advocating for women veterans, modernizing the VA, supporting VA's long-term care facilities, improving VA's management and oversight, and ensuring our legislative accomplishments are implemented effectively. Our veteran community is changing and becoming extraordinarily diverse. The veteran community includes more women, LGBTQ+, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native veterans than ever before. The diversity of our armed forces is an asset, and that strength should be honored when veterans come into VA. Veterans deserve to always feel safe and welcome when they walk through the doors. Relatedly, VA must acknowledge the diversity of its workforce and must address systemic discrimination in the workplace. We must also ensure that healthcare and benefits are fairly and equitably distributed to all eligible veterans. And to do that, we must also ensure a safe and equitable workplace for VA employees. Now, our work to prevent veteran suicide also continues. And the challenges of last year have only given us more resolve to do so. So we must continue to pursue well-researched and scientifically sound policies that have been proven to prevent death by suicide. One such policy the committee is working towards this Congress is expanding lethal means counseling so that more VA staff, contractors, and community providers have the tools they need to help vulnerable veterans and reduce veteran suicide. These are big goals, but I know that with the support and the insight of the organizations we have here today, as well as with the support of the administration, we will be able to deliver on them and fulfill the promises we've made to our veterans. So I'm looking forward to hearing your testimonies today and thank all the organizations here today for their continued advocacy and support of the veteran community. So thank you all for being here today. Now, Chairman Tester, I recognize you for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, and good morning. Welcome to the leadership of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. We are grateful to have you here today, and thank you to the leaders and advocates who will be joining us on today's second panel. I look forward to hearing from you. This is undoubtedly a critical and unprecedented time for our nation and for our nation's veterans and their families. At the top of our challenges is this pandemic and getting shots into the arms of as many veterans as soon as possible. As chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, my focus is bolstering the vaccine supply chain and ensuring there is a system in place to efficiently and equitably distribute vaccines to everyone in the veterans community, regardless of where they live. But we need your help in getting the word out to your fellow veterans that when it's their turn to get a vaccine, they should get one. That is the only way that we're going to get beyond this pandemic and get our communities and our economy back on track. Commander Roesch, thank you for all the work that you've done on behalf of veterans while serving as National Commander. I know that the VFW allowed the VA to use its facility in Libby, Montana to distribute COVID vaccines, and that is very much appreciated by all of us. We need to hear from you whether the VA is operating in a transparent manner as they execute legislative priorities, including the expansion of the Caregivers Program, the John Scott Hannon Mental Health Improvement Act, and the Deborah Sampson Act. For the second panel, I want to hear about how VA's numerous programs are affecting the members of your various organizations. Veterans and survivors are represented here today. Your testimony will cover a variety of issues vital to ensuring that we know what your priorities are to work on this year. Tell me what inequities minority veterans are facing when it comes to receiving VA services and what the VA needs to do to improve survivor benefits, among many other issues. And I want to know how toxic exposure impacts your members. Last year, we worked hard to expand the presumptive list for Agent Orange-related conditions. Now I want to hear your ideas for how we can change the presumptive process to better serve our veterans. We're here to listen to you. The voice you and your members provide is an important source of information as we attempt to do right by all veterans. Welcome again, and thank you for all that you and your organizations do on behalf of veterans and their families. With that, it's back to you, Chairman Takano.
Oh, there it goes. Thank you, Chairman Tester. Ranking Member Bost, I now recognize you for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning to everyone. And I want to let you know how much of an honor it is to join Chairman Takano, Chairman Tester, and Ranking Member Moran in welcoming you here today for this hearing. You know, these hearings are one of the highlights of our work every year. They provide an important opportunity for us to learn from you all and from your organizations on what your priorities are. They also allow us to reflect on the critical work that we need to do each day to support our veterans. Although we cannot sit in the same room as we do in other years with our VSO leaders and your members from across the country, and I do want to say hi to all the Illinois members that are out there. But I want to have faith by next year we will return to a traditional time of hosting these hearings in person. I'm really looking forward to that opportunity to meet and greet each and every one of you. But in the meantime, it's a privilege to participate in these hearings as the leader from the Republicans for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I look forward to continuing to work through the procedures to improve the lives of veterans and their families. You know, I've said this before, and I want to say it again to all of you here. I am committed to working with each and every one of you to find common ground and address the tough issues that affect our men and women of your organizations each day. My door is always open. You know, as was mentioned earlier, I am a Marine. My father and grandfather served, and my son and grandson are now serving. This work is deeply personal to me and my family, just as I know it is to you and your families as well. I do not take this responsibility of this role lightly. It is because of the support of organizations like yours that there have been so many positive changes underway in the VA in the last several years. I would like to take a moment, if I can, to thank each of you and your service for your service both in and out of uniform. I've worked closely with your organizations in past Congresses, and I would like to highlight a few organizations for their work. The Veterans War was instrumental in shaping and advancing legislation to modernize the VA's appeals process and the Service Disability Veteran Insurance Program. The Gold Star wives worked tirelessly to advocate for their families of service, those families of service members who made the ultimate sacrifice. And to every group here, thank you for your great work in helping us to enact the Johnny Eikenson and David P. Rowe, MD, Veterans Health Care and Benefit Improvement Act of 2020. With your advocacy and input, we have enacted laws that deliver on promises to veterans. But our work's not done. We must continue to build on changes that are underway. And as ranking member, my priorities this Congress include overseeing VA's continued response to COVID-19 pandemic, overseeing the implementation of recent legislation successes, creating a pathway to care and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxic exposures, strengthening services for women veterans, preventing veteran suicide, improving the transition process, preserving veterans' choice, and increasing access to care, protecting veterans' Second Amendment rights, and modernizing the VA outdated IT system. I am aware that this is an ambitious agenda, but I am sure that working hand in hand, we can achieve great results. I'm looking forward to doing that. Again, thank you to each and every one of you for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you today. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Ranking Member Moran, you are now recognized for your opening remarks.
Chairman Takano and Ranking Member Bost, Chairman Tester, great to be with you again for a very valuable hearing. Welcome to everyone. Commander Roesch, thank you for your service to our country and to other veterans. I want to thank the Veterans of Foreign Wars and other VSOs, those on our second panel, for joining us in this format today to discuss all of your and your members' top priorities. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the veterans in Kansas and around the country who are watching and following our work closely today as we gather here by technology. I want to say thank you again to Mr. Shane Worley, the VFW's legislative advocate from Kansas, and a fellow Jayhawk, as well as Mr. Herb Schwarzkopf, the quartermaster and adjutant for the Kansas VFW, for meeting with me just a few days ago to discuss their 2021 priorities of they and their VFW fellow members. I look forward to hearing from all of you today. I'll be in and out just a bit as I have two other hearings going on at the same time, but I've read the testimony and I appreciate the things that you are conveying to these two committees, House and Senate. I'm very grateful for your help. We've made significant accomplishments occur for veterans. 31 veteran bills were signed into law, including landmark mental health care legislation, education and disability benefit improvements, expansion of benefits for survivors, and enhanced overall resources for service members, veterans, and their families. Now comes another very important part, not just passing legislation, but ensuring that those laws are faithfully executed and that they work. They work to improve the lives of our veterans. This is another phase where your advocacy is very critical. The members of your organizations are on the front line and they see firsthand where the VA is succeeding and sometimes where the VA still faces significant challenges. And your input is useful to us in trying to address these issues. Our highest priority right now, at least my highest priority right now, is the health and economic safety of our veterans who've been affected by the pandemic. As the VA administers more vaccines across the country and returns to an operational steady state, and I visited both the operations vaccine sites in Wichita and Topeka, I saw some pretty impressive things. I ask that you keep us informed of the progress that you see taking place in combating the pandemic and protecting veterans and their family members' lives. I appreciate the legislation that Chairman Takano indicated had passed the House of Representatives in short order. That bill was amended to include the authorization for the VA to also vaccinate spouses of veterans. And it passed the United States Senate, where it will now last evening, and it will return back to the House to consider our amendment. It's the Save Lives Act that Chairman Takano was rightfully highlighting. I was joined by Chairman Tester and by Senator Blumenthal and Senator Bozeman in sponsoring that amendment. I know that our veterans organizations provide a real and needed voice to veterans and their beneficiaries. And I know that there are veterans who feel underrepresented, unheard, and marginalized. You also provide an annual check for our committee to make certain that we're on the right track and that no veteran or their survivors fall through any gaps. While I was reading over the testimony, I noticed that we share a significant number of priorities: enhancement of suicide prevention and mental health care, addressing toxic exposure and improving women's health care at the VA, addressing the 90-10 loophole in a manner that's fair and reasonable to both student veterans and schools, as well as working toward a solution that veterans can receive their earned benefits both from DOD and the VA. You have my commitment. I'm certain I speak for Chairman Tester and our committee members that the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee will continue to partner with you and the veteran community on addressing these priorities. Look forward to your presentations today. Know we have more work to do, but veteran voices are so critical to getting it right. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you, sir.
Thank you. Hal Roesch, National Commander-in-Chief, the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States. Accompanying Chief Roesch is Mr. Vincent B.J. Lawrence, Executive Director of the VFW's Washington, D.C. office. Mr. Lawrence, you are now recognized recognized to introduce the VFW's leadership team.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Takano. Assisting us today will be my Director of National Legislative Service, Mr. Pat Murray.
Mr. Lawrence, you might want to begin again. We're having trouble hearing you. I think you're still on mute. Can you pause for a moment? And let's maybe we should.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
I can hear you. Why don't you start again?
I will. Our virtual world. Again, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Joining me today is Mr. Pat Murray. He's our Director of National Legislative Service for the VFW. I'm also joined by Mr. Ryan Gallucci. He is our Director of National Veterans Service. And watching live and representing the Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary is our Auxiliary National President, Sandy Onswetter. I will now yield back to you, Mr. Chairman, for your continuation of introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I now recognize Representative Whitman. You are recognized to introduce Commander Roesch.
All right, very good. Well, Chairman Takano, Chairman Tester, Ranking Members Bost and Moran, thanks again for the opportunity. And I'm here to introduce a proud Virginian and a tireless advocate for service members, veterans, and their families. Hal Roesch is from Hampton, Virginia. He was installed as the 112th Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars on July 24th of 2020. Hal is a 20-year U.S. Air Force retiree serving from 1982 to 2002, and he earned his VFW eligibility during his combat service in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm and overseas service as part of Southern Watch. He first joined the VFW in 1991 in Sumter, South Carolina. He later became post commander in Spring Lake, North Carolina, and he maintains his Gold Legacy Life membership at VFW Post 3219 in Phoebus, Virginia. He served in elected and appointed positions at every level in the VFW, from the post to the district to the department levels of the organization. He's currently a financial advisor with First Command Financial Planning. He received his Associate of Arts degree in Avionics Systems Technology at the Community College of the Air Force, a great institution. He has one daughter and son-in-law, Sarah and Jason Tricker, and two grandsons, Max and Owen, a great, great Virginian. He's married to his beautiful bride, Beth, and they now reside in Hampton, Virginia. He spent the past year making sure the VFW has continued to do their important work, even with the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And under Hal's leadership, the organization has continued to help in their local communities, aided those in need, and he's now providing space in communities for testing and vaccination sites. Hal has maintained this vision for veterans throughout his tenure as Commander-in-Chief and is honored to be able to present his vision here today. So members of the two committees, I present to you the VFW's National Commander-in-Chief, Hal Roesch.
Thank you, Representative Whitman. Commander Roesch, you are now recognized for your opening comments.
Thank you very much. Chairman Tester, Takano, ranking members Moran and Bost, members of the Senate and House Committees on Veteran Affairs. It's my honor to be with you today on behalf of the more than 1.6 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and its auxiliary, America's largest combat veterans organization. I would like to begin by thanking the members of the committees for your clear vision for veterans in 2020. During a time of divisive partisanship, you worked across the aisle and across chambers to pass legislation to improve care and benefits for America's veterans and their families. We would equally like to thank you and your staffs for the bipartisan work to pass this year's National Defense Authorization Act, the Commander John Scott Hannon Mental Health Care Improvement Act, the Compact Act, the Johnny Isaacson and David P. Rowe Veterans Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act. These significant pieces of legislation will provide care and benefits for millions of veterans. It'll allow for expanded care for veterans long overlooked, and hopefully save the lives of veterans who need help now more than ever. COVID-19 has hit this country hard. The veterans have felt the impact just like all of our fellow Americans. The VA healthcare system had to adapt to an unseen enemy. COVID-19 wreaked havoc on veterans in their homes, at their jobs, and in their schools. Our nation has fought this disease for over a year. And while the end may be in sight, we should learn from this devastating period in our history so we can come out stronger than ever. The VFW's top priority for the 117th Congress is comprehensive toxic exposure reform. Toxic exposure is a cross-generational issue that affects every veteran who has ever worn the uniform. In World War I, troops were exposed to gas. In World War II, radiation. Vietnam, Agent Orange. In the Gulf War, it was oil fires, and in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were exposed to burn pits and other environmental hazards. Toxic exposure for our troops has been synonymous with service for more than 100 years. But every time we're faced with it, we act as if it's never happened before. A comprehensive system for taking care of our troops exposed to hazards is long past due. The VFW demands that Congress works in a bipartisan manner with the veteran service organizations to develop a comprehensive solution for toxic exposure. We must create a framework that will take care of all past, present, and future generations of veterans. Again, that is long overdue. First, the VFW recommends that a commission independent from DOD and VA be established to identify toxic and environmental exposures due to military service. Second, the VFW recommends that the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine review and evaluate the available scientific evidence regarding certain diseases and exposure to toxic substances. Finally, the VFW believes Congress should require VA to grant a presumption of service connection for the conditions deemed to be associated with toxic exposure and environmental hazards. VFW past Commander-in-Chief Larry Rivers provided congressional testimony on this very issue in 1990. During that hearing, Mr. Rivers observed that the pursuit of a perfect understanding predicated upon scientific certainty had stalled efforts to provide comprehensive benefits to veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange. To overcome this, Congress implemented a process for establishing a presumption of service connection based on a significant correlation between exposure and the onset of disease. Then, as now, we believe this represents a fair and compassionate solution to a complex problem. Next, the VFW wants to work with Congress to further improve veterans' claims processing. The VFW believes that a VFW claim is the gateway for care and benefits for every veteran. Over the last 2 years, the VFW has grown frustrated with the Veterans Benefits Administration and its abrupt, often arbitrary changes to the VA claims process. Thankfully, Congress listened to the VFW and our partners and worked aggressively to hold the VA accountable, institute policy changes, and reinstate veteran-centric business processes. However, there is still more work to do. Countless veterans have benefited from the decades-old 48-hour review policy. The VFW's rating review team routinely found errors during the review, correcting most of them in less than a business day. Since the VBA abruptly ended this process last year, veterans must now wait months, if not years, for the VA formal review process to fix minor errors. In recent weeks, the VBA leadership has come to the table with the VSOs to build a new notification and expedited review system. We're grateful for the progress, but if the VBA cannot follow through, our veterans will still need legislation to restore this critical review process. More still needs to be done to bring VA processing into the 21st century, such as rebuilding the stakeholder enterprise portal and upgrading va.gov. These actions will allow for more seamless delivery of care and benefits that our veterans rightly deserve. The VFW is also highly focused on quality economic opportunities for our veterans. COVID-19 has impacted the livelihood of countless veterans across this country, both in their careers and in their education. The VFW calls upon Congress to extend funding for existing programs such as Vet Tech and VR&E. The VFW believes all these programs should be available for the life of the veteran, not just for certain periods after service. Another concern of the VFW is closing the 90-10 loophole. We believe that this is the correct end goal. However, the VFW wouldn't want this loophole closure to negatively affect good schools simply because of tax status. That is why we recommend a waiver clause to be placed in any 90-10 GI Bill proposal to ensure good schools are not lumped in with predatory institutions. Additionally, members of the National Guard and Reserve must be credited for all activations in support of federal service missions. When deployed to protect our border and to protect our nation's capital, Congress had to pass emergency legislation to make sure these troops earn their education benefits. Congress must end this practice once and for all. Many of these economic opportunity programs fall under VBA to administer. The VFW believes VBA's organizational structure needs updating. The VFW proposes Congress create a fourth administration under the VA with its own undersecretary who could refocus resources, provide a champion for these programs, and create that central point of contact for VSOs and Congress. We urge Congress to pass legislation that would establish a fourth administration in the VA to oversee these vital benefits. Lastly, the VFW would like to address the care and respect of all of our members, service members, veterans, and families. While we believe there have been great strides made on behalf of those minority veterans we serve, we have also seen indications that we still have a ways to go. The VFW prides ourselves on treating and viewing all veterans equally. But we have seen that there are some who still do not receive the equitable treatment that they have earned and deserve. Underserved groups like women veterans, racial and ethnic minority veterans, and LGBTQ veterans deserve the same care and respect as everyone else. And it is a responsibility of all of us to ensure that happens. The VFW believes a first step to begin this process is to expand our knowledge. VA must consistently collect the correct race, ethnic, and sexual orientation data in the electronic health records of veterans. Before we can begin to address inequalities among veterans, we need to fully be informed about the depth of our veterans population. Additionally, veterans need a safe and accepting place to receive the care they deserve. There is no room for discrimination or abuse within the walls of any VA facility, be it patients, family members, or employees. The VFW was disappointed to see this was not always the case in past years and vows to work with everyone involved to make sure veterans are never mistreated in any VA facility. We can do better. We owe it to all of our veterans to do better. Chairman Tester and Takano, Ranking Members Moran and Bost, other distinguished members of these committees, speaking for all the members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and our auxiliary, and on behalf of the millions of service members, veterans, and their families around the world, I would like to thank you for your time, your attention to these critical issues, and I would expect, as members of these prestigious committees, that in the coming years, you retain a 2020 vision for veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Roesch. I will begin with 3 minutes, recognize myself, and I'll begin my questioning, Commander, by asking the same question I asked the DAV and the American Legion a couple of weeks ago. On January 6th, Americans watched as insurgents stormed the U.S. Capitol. We later learned that current and former military personnel participated in the January 6th attack. Has the VFW taken actions or provided guidance to VFW's membership in response to those events?
We currently have policies and procedures in place within our organization that if we have members that have broken the law or discredit this organization, that we can take measures to have them removed. We don't have a separate branch of the VFW to go out to specifically try to identify. We rely on the Department of Justice to provide us with that information, and if convicted, we will take swift action.
Thank you, Commander. The House Committee is working to ensure a more welcoming and equitable VA for all veterans. I appreciate the remarks toward the end of your presentation. Can I count on your support as we work to ensure all veterans feel welcome at VA and in veteran spaces?
Absolutely. On July 24th, when I took the helm of the VFW in my acceptance speech, I made a comment to the VFW that extends our thought to the VA, which is everybody is treated with dignity and respect. And if you can't treat them with dignity and respect, we don't need you in the VFW. Turn in your cards and get out. We expect the same treatment in the VA system.
Building on what you just told me, can you tell me some of the things that VFW is doing to ensure that all veterans feel welcome in your organization and your posts? And what steps do you think VA needs to do to prioritize? What should VA prioritize to ensure all veterans feel welcome? You mentioned some of them already, such as the data.
From the VFW standpoint, one of the first things I did with my senior vice, Fritz Mihalchek, and my junior vice, Tim Borland, was we established a diversity advisory group made up of all aspects of the civilian world that are now veterans, be it if they're LGBTQ, African Americans, Asians, you name it. We put them together to advise us of the needs of our members and to give us ideas to how to make this organization better. One of the things we're currently putting the final touches on is a hotline, not just for discrimination, but harassment too, that allow an easy flow of information from problem areas to us. The VA needs to kind of have the same operation where if there is, it has to start at the ground level. If we see something in a VA that is not right, it doesn't necessarily always have to be the person that's being discriminated against to report it. We need to be confident enough that if I see something in a VA, I can report it on behalf of somebody else. Communication is key to everything. If we lose the communication, we lose the fight. Open lines of communication without any pushback or repercussions is the way to go.
Commander, I appreciate your answer. It went over, but I appreciate your answer. I want to now move on to Chairman Tester for his 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. And Commander Roesch, thank you for your opening statement. I very much appreciate your leadership and the good work of your leadership team. It makes a difference. Look, getting shots in the arms is a top priority. In this case, for our veterans, it's really, really important. Ranking Member Moran and myself had a meeting with the rest of the folks in the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee not too long ago, and we talked with the VHA head, Dr. Stone, and learned about vaccine hesitancy being an issue among some veterans, particularly rural veterans. If we're going to get this pandemic behind us, get our economy back on track, and make sure our veterans are safe, the vaccine is really important. Can you tell me if the VFW has been able to, first of all, if they knew about this issue, number one, and number two, if they're doing anything about it?
Yes, we are fully aware of this issue. One of the first things that you had mentioned on was we have put the word out to all of our VFW posts and had a great response to open up for testing and vaccination sites. We're out there in the rural areas. So we are opening our doors. The VA is accepting the invitations and we're getting this done. I was lucky enough to get mine last week. I did a Facebook Live. So we go out to the VFW and other veterans that this is what we all need to do.
I know the toxic exposure is a top priority for the VFW, and I very much appreciate that. It's a top priority for us too in the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. We're working on hypertension and MGUS, which I believe has a greater connection with Agent Orange than even the presumptives we added last year. Is that correct to your knowledge?
It is.
Okay. And so moving forward, you pointed out in your opening statement that this isn't the first time toxic exposure has been around with Agent Orange or the burn pits, and it's probably not going to be the last. And you'd like to see some sort of mechanism out there based on science so that the veterans have some sort of certainty if they get these exposures, they'll be covered. Is that pretty much correct from a VFW point of view?
Absolutely. We need a framework that is not part of the DOD or VA, that is separate, independent with the academy. So we have the science, we have the medical, in conjunction with the VSOs, that will set the bar to where we have that scientific correlation, and we set the bar, and anything above that needs to be recognized.
Well, we look forward to working with the VFW and other VSOs that are passionate about this issue to get this done. I want to talk about a little bit about the caregivers program. We passed a bill to support the caregivers out there. I'm just going to ask you very quickly, from your members' point of view, is this program being implemented at this moment in time, and is it implemented adequately?
It is being implemented. We're glad that we have it. It is a little slow getting off the ground. Again, it's a communication problem. We have a lot of veterans out there that is slow to get the word. They don't have internet. They don't have the computers. It's mail, seeing friends, visiting the local VFWs to get their information.
Thank you, Commander Roesch. We appreciate the VFW. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. I call upon Ranking Member Bost for his 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commander Roesch, for being here today. You know, currently, if a VA appoints a veteran, a fiduciary, to help with their VA benefits, the VA also sends that veteran's name to the FBI's next list. And just like that, it's illegal for them to own a firearm. It is illegal for them to go hunting with their grandchildren or children. We know that some veterans are unwilling to go to the VA for benefits and care because of this policy. You know, this is an unacceptable policy, and that's why I've introduced HR 1217. The bill would prohibit the VA from continuing this practice unless there is an order from a judge or a magistrate that says the person may be a harm to themselves or others. Does the VFW support this legislation, and if so, why?
We do support this legislation. It's one thing if a veteran voluntarily gives up their weapons, but it's a Second Amendment. Anytime we lose the right for us to have our guns, it needs to be done through the judicial side, not the medical side.
That's correct. I'm glad you agree with that. You know, what are the most important and technological improvements that could be made in disability compensation claims processing, especially with automation the way it is?
There are several areas that we could go into that. I would like Mr. Gallucci, he's our boots on the ground when it comes to this, to chime in on this.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief. There are many lessons that we were forced to learn over the last year due to COVID-19. Thankfully, the VFW was ready basically from day one for our advocates to provide virtual claims assistance. There are a number of tools that the Department of Veterans Affairs makes available to our advocates to do that, whether it's credentials for their IT systems or ways that our claims management databases can talk to VA. However, we've been stalled over the last few years in really reforming some of these systems. One of my favorite, Commander-in-Chief Roesch mentioned in his testimony, Stakeholder Enterprise Portal. It's basically the service provider side of e-benefits or va.gov moving forward. I think there's a lot of potential to Stakeholder Enterprise Portal for identity verification so that our service officers can provide assistance to veterans anytime, anywhere. We're doing it today virtually, but we're doing it by any means necessary, leveraging the technology that we have at our disposal. We're really eager to come together with this committee and with Department of Veterans Affairs to reform some of these systems and make sure that our service officers and our veterans have what they need to take advantage of the benefits they've earned.
Thank you for that answer. And my time has almost expired, but before I yield back, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter in the statement from the American Warrior Partnership into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I now call upon Ranking Member Moran for his 3 minutes of questioning.
Commander-in-Chief, thank you very much for your testimony. It caused me to look back at Kansas history to determine if I knew every VFW commander-in-chief from my own state, and there have only been 3. I did not know the one who served Mr. Richards, who served in 1953, but John J. Stang and Norman G. Staub were longtime friends of mine, and I was utilize this moment to pay recognition and honor to those two veterans who served Kansas and America so well. So thank you for causing me to look back at a moment in my life and in the life of the VFW in our state. I want to comment on a couple of things you said in your testimony. The 9010 bill, we're working on it with Senators Carper, Cassidy, and Langford, and it would address, as you recommend, your concerns about a fair waiver process. So the drafting that we're doing at the moment to get a good 9010 bill includes the waiver that you recommend. And additionally, the GI Bill parity for the National Guard that you said was needed is a bill that we're attempting to draft now. We're working with the Department of Defense and the VA on technical assistance to get a bill in place that eliminates the disparity between Guard and active duty. So thank you for highlighting those two issues and giving me an opportunity to tell my colleagues that we're following your instructions and leadership. I'd also like to thank the VFW for working with us in the past year to craft emergency solutions that we were able to swiftly pass into law to protect student veterans and their families during the pandemic. And I also thank the VFW for supporting our efforts to pass legislation to reduce veteran unemployment through a rapid retraining program. Those items became legislation. They became law, and were passed due to the COVID-19 and with your help. And then finally, your toxic exposure high priority. I think our committee shares that. You mentioned, highlight the importance of an independent commission. Would you please speak to the importance of that commission within what I hope is an enduring framework, not ad hoc, but something that creates a framework that endures, that directs the VA's decisions in regard to exposures?
Sure, I'd like to have Mr. Murray, he's our boots on the ground with that one, so if he would be so kind.
Thank you, Commander.
Mr. Ranking Member, our recommendation of an independent commission is to set up outside of VA and DOD to look at this differently so that it's not incumbent upon the entities that are there that are going to provide care will be the ones that are determining what exactly is needed. We want to reestablish a framework very similar to the Agent Orange Act of 1990 that is driven by the national academies and provides a presumption of exposure for toxic exposure. We want that to be re-implemented for different toxic exposures without a sunset date so that all veterans in any future conflicts won't have to keep coming back to the table as we do seemingly year after year for every new group of veterans that are exposed due to their service.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Moran. I now call on Representative Brownlee, who chairs the House subcommittee on health for the Veterans Affairs Committee. Ms. Brownlee, go ahead for your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commander Roesch, for being here, for your service to our country, and certainly your leadership service as we speak. I wanted to mention that my father and his side of the family, my father being a former Marine, is from the Hampton, Virginia area. So I know that area and where you live quite well. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your support and VFW's support of the passage of the Deborah Sampson Act that passed in the last Congress. Appreciate that very much, and look forward to its full implementation as we move forward in the 117th Congress. I also appreciate you mentioning in your written testimony in terms of looking ahead, your support of two of my bills, one, the Equal Access to Contraception Act, and also the Women's Veterans Trust Act, which would analyze the need for long-term residential treatment programs for drug and alcohol dependency, particularly for our women veterans. And one bill that you did mention that I'm hoping that you might take a look at is my bill on the Homeless Veterans with Children Reintegration Act, which would direct the Department of Labor to prioritize veterans with children in its reintegration program. And so if you could maybe comment on that issue and reassure me that you'll take a hard look in supporting this bill.
Well, absolutely. I'll turn it over to Mr. Murray, who is our legislative director.
Ma'am, childcare for veterans across the spectrum is very important for the VFW, whether it's homeless veterans, whether it's women veterans whether they're looking to return to the workforce, also including student veterans. Childcare is a very important thing, that having that burden taken off their shoulders is vital for veterans. I promise you we will take a look at that bill and make sure that we are communicating with your office and see if we can lend our support to that.
Thank you very much. And I only have a few more seconds, but Commander, was wondering if you were aware of the current backlog at the National Personnel Records Center, and if so, if you could share with us its impact, if it's having any impact on your membership.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, due to COVID, everybody's got a backlog, but that's a vital institution that we need for our veterans to be able to get records. We're just going to have to tackle these head on, and it's probably going to involve some staff increases, which is going to be, we're going to have to put some money at it.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Brownlee. I now call on Senator Hassan for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much to Chair Tester and Ranking Member Moran, to Chairman Takano and Ranking Member Bost for holding these presentations. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today and for the service that you provide to our nation's veterans. In speaking with members of veteran service organizations in New Hampshire during the past year, I've been amazed, but not at all surprised, by the ingenuity and adaptability that they have shown in their efforts to continue supporting and serving Granite State veterans during this pandemic. To our witnesses today, the work that you and your organizations have done to help veterans during one of the most difficult periods in our country's history is incredibly important, and it deserves to be recognized. And that's why I'm announcing today that I will be introducing a resolution to recognize the tremendous services that all veteran service organizations have provided during the pandemic to support veterans and their families throughout these challenging times. I would welcome support from all members of this committee and my other Senate colleagues on this resolution. I do have one question for Mr. Roesch. Mr. Roesch, in your written testimony, you support the idea of Congress creating a fourth administration at the VA to focus solely on economic and education programs. As you may know, I worked with Senator Rubio to introduce the Vet Op Act last Congress to create such an administration. And we'll be reintroducing this bipartisan bicameral bill again in the coming weeks. Right now, these economic and education programs fall under the Secretary for Benefits, which also oversees the disability and compensation process. Mr. Roesch, can you describe why we need a separate administration to focus on these programs?
We do. The VBA is getting so many programs. It's the old adage of, you can have a bunch of technicians, but you have no experts. And by separating them, it'll allow to still have the technicians, but then have the experts to refocus and retool those that benefit the veterans at the end. It's definitely something that is needed. Mr. Murray's been working that. Mr. Murray, you have any comments on that?
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Senator, we did support the Vet Op Act last Congress. When it is introduced, we will support it again. The VFW believes that the economic opportunity programs under VBA's purview deserve the full attention that they need. CMP right now dominates VBA, as it should, because it also deserves its own unique attention. We believe that separating the two will give a unique undersecretary the ability to truly advance both of those categories of programs.
Thank you so much. I think it would be a win-win for the country and for veterans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. I now recognize Representative Nels for 3 minutes. Representative Nels, your mic is not turned on. If you would just, Representative Nels, we need to get your mic turned on. There it goes. Why don't you try now, sir? No, it's still not working. Technical team, can we get Mr. Nels' microphone turned on? Okay, Mr. Nels, we'll work on getting your mic turned on. In the meantime, Mr. Lamb, are you prepared to? If Mr. Lamb, are you ready?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, why don't we go to you, Mr. Lamb?
I want to thank all of our witnesses from the VFW for joining us today, for all the work that you do. And I want to echo Ms. Brownlee and saying I know that the personnel records issue has been a very frustrating one for a lot of your members throughout the year. I have been working on it, including with the administration, and we're hoping for some good news on that soon. So just want to let you know it is at the highest point on my agenda, and we really are working for a breakthrough there. I wanted to return to the topic of January 6th, and I feel very strongly that it is our job collectively, all as veterans, whether Democrat, Republican, or nothing at all, to police our own on this one. That was the seat of our national government established in the Constitution that was attacked, and we all swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. And so I think that may require everybody taking some active measures to determine what was at the root of this and to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And I know you've addressed already with the chairman following the list of names of people who have been indicted and prosecuted, and I think that's a great thing. But I also would encourage you to consider active measures related to the use of VFW facilities around the country as meeting places or gathering places for these particular groups. The VFW in particular was actually mentioned in a report in Atlantic Magazine in November. The article, I think, was called Inside the Right-Wing Militia. But the founder of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, held a meeting in a VFW outside of Nashville in July of last summer, and it's quoted and described in the article. And so my question is a brief one. It's really more of an encouragement looking forward, but I was curious if you have any policies in place now that advise your local chapters about the use of their facilities with respect to a group like the Oath Keepers that has actually declared civil war on our government. And if you don't have any of those policies, are you considering advising your local chapters in the future?
Yeah, we do have policies and procedures in place, again, against anything that brings discredit upon our organization in the Constitution, for that matter. What we have found is we have had some groups that have used some VFW halls in the past under the guise of, I'm just a member and I want to have some guys come in and have a meeting. Once it was, we realized, and the Post realized what was really going on, it was immediately shut down. Unfortunately, they got the soundbite, they got the picture, and we've had others that have used it without ever being in a VFW post, that we have sent out cease and desist letters to them. We don't condone it. We don't allow it in our post, and we police from the post up, if you will. And they're getting better at it. Most of those are just somebody trying to do the right thing that turns out not to be what we thought.
I appreciate that, sir. And I just encourage you to continue to try to refine those policies as much as possible, especially as we learn of particular groups like the Oath Keepers that have identifiable logos and personnel that are easier to spot. So it's not as if you're discriminating based on views, but on particular organizations that have actually declared war against our country. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Lamb. I now call on Mr. Nels in the hope that his microphone works. Mr. Nels?
Chairman Takamo, can you hear me?
I can. Are you wearing a VFW hat, sir?
I am Chairman Takano and Tester. Thank you for your leadership as well as ranking members Bost and Moran for what you do every day. And Commander Roesch, thank you for your service. And earlier you mentioned that Sandy, the national commander for the Ladies Auxiliary, is on with us. And I have to tell you, as a former post commander, I truly understand firsthand just how important ladies auxiliaries are to posts around our country, because they, I always said they keep the men straight in these posts. But I want to thank Sandy for her service as well to our veterans. And I do, sir, I proudly wear my VFW cap today to show support to the VFW, my most beloved organization. And I received my All-American Post Commander hat from National Commander Raymond Sisk back in 2002. Sir, I don't know if you knew Commander Sisk, but what a great American and what a great leader. And it was a very proud moment for me back in 2002 to receive my hat from him. And, you know, Chairman Tester mentioned the VFWs opening their posts for vaccines, and my home post 3903 in Rosenberg, Texas. Last weekend I was there on Saturday, and the veterans were lined up. Hundreds of veterans received their first vaccination last Saturday, and I'm proud to say that they'll be coming back again in the 21 days or so to receive their second. So I know there are posts out there doing what they can to help with this COVID pandemic. And but my question is more geared towards mental health. I'm passionate about mental health, mental illness, and it sickens me to every day. And while we're on this presentation here, the number of veterans that will just take their lives. So what are we doing? I know that legislation has been passed for suicide prevention, but we still are seeing veterans 14 a day taking their lives that have not received that VA care 2 years prior to death. So what are we doing to make sure that we can stop this? This needs to be zero, Commander, zero.
We absolutely agree with that goal number. Zero is the way to go. Congratulations on that cap, by the way. We don't give those away very easily. That was earned. Mr. Gallucci is our expert in this area, and I'd like to have him address that question.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief. This is something that the VFW has been extremely passionate about over the last few years. Our Executive Director, BJ Lawrence, had joined us when we kicked off our mental wellness campaign with our partners, Given Hour and some others, just a few years back. What we've been doing is aggressively training our service officers, our members, to be agents of change in their community. Look, there's only so much that VA can do, but there's a lot that we can do as veterans in our community. Before this hearing, we all took our Know the 5 Signs of Emotional Suffering cards that our partners Given Hour developed with us. These have been an important tool at our posts to really remind our members how to have a difficult conversation with one of our comrades. Beyond that, we've trained our service officers in understanding the emotional suffering, social determinants of health, to make sure that when they're meeting with a veteran, that if they're having trouble, that they know what to say and how to handle it. But beyond that, VA needs to open its aperture in how they evaluate veteran suicide. In understanding social determinants of health, we know many times it's not just a mental health condition that can make a veteran want to harm themselves. It can be lack of housing, lack of a job. It can be a denied VA benefit claim. We believe that VA has this data to better understand what's happening in the veterans community if they just look at Veterans Benefits Administration, and we encourage them to do that moving forward for their reports on suicide prevention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Blessings. Thank you, Chairman Takano.
Thank you, Representative Nels. I now call on Senator Bozeman for his 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking members for, again, having the hearing today. We've accomplished so much in the last several years through the committee, but more importantly, we simply wouldn't have gotten that done without the help of our veterans service organizations and the great work that you do. And I also will give a shout out to the auxiliaries. I always talk about them being the backbone of the organization. My wife and 3 daughters correct me and say they're also the brains of the organization. So we really do appreciate you very, very much. Mr. Roesch, in your full testimony, you stated that Agent Orange was sprayed on bases in Thailand during the war in Vietnam. I was made aware of this issue a few years ago by Arkansas veteran Bill Rhodes, who served in Thailand during the Vietnam War. He had his VA claims denied after developing several illnesses linked to toxic herbicide exposure. Last week, Senator Tester and I reintroduced a bill that will modify the presumption of service connection for veterans who served in Thailand. Mr. Roesch, can you briefly speak about your experience with veterans like Mr. Rhodes, who served in Thailand, and address the importance of passing this language?
Our job is to take care of all veterans, and that being past, present, and future veterans. We're very much aware of the fact that Agent Orange has a much greater reach than we originally were willing to recognize. There is the data now. Wherever it is, it needs to be recognized to get over that bar that is set to recognize it. Mr. Murray has been working diligently on this. I'd like to have a couple minutes just for him to touch on that.
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Senator Bozeman, that is a great example of what we're talking about, having to keep coming back and piecemealing the different toxic exposure pieces. The veterans in Thailand specifically were only granted presumption of service if they were guarding the perimeter of the bases where the Agent Orange was sprayed. To suggest that someone who was walking by that perimeter, or it might have sprayed downwind, or also gone into the drinking water like in Vietnam, it's absurd to think that Agent Orange, such a dangerous chemical, was so specific. But that's why we want a framework in place so that we don't keep coming back to address Agent Orange Thailand, or folks in Guam, or the Inawat Atoll radiation experiments, or the K2 veterans, or anybody around the world who is exposed to dangers due to their service.
Well, thank you for that. And we do appreciate again, the grassroots effort, as you say, so that we could quit piecemealing these things as we go forward. This also is a great example of, again, the VSO's membership coming forward, expressing concerns to us, and then all of us working together to try and fix some of these things. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to you and to Senator Tester for having this hearing, and to all of the members of the VFW who are here today. Your service to our nation is really beyond words, and I want to express my gratitude and my family's. 2 of my sons have served, one as a Marine Corps infantry officer in Afghanistan, the other as a Navy SEAL. And I really appreciate all you do for the veterans of our great nation. I want to express my particular thanks for your emphasis on toxic exposures. Your testimony is so powerful on burn pits, Agent Orange, K2. I want to express my particular appreciation for my legislation, your support for it, the K2 Veterans Care Act. As you know, the veterans associated with the Karshi-Kanabad Air Base, also known as K2, have suffered from the effects of these toxins, cancer, other diseases over the year. We need to go beyond what we did during the last Congress, and your support, I think, will be really instrumental. I want to focus on an area that really is so immediately important, and that is the potential for vaccine hesitancy among our veterans, and what the VFW can do more and better, and what we in the Congress can do more and better to overcome that hesitancy. You know, our veterans are aware more than any other community in our country how important it is to help each other. And they should know that the safety of each of us depends on the safety of all of us. So let me ask you how our community of veterans can better help each other to understand the need for everybody to be vaccinated.
It all starts with communication. We have to be able to have clear lines of communication and get rid of the clutter that's out there. Frustration drives a lot of it, in the fact that VAs across the country, one may be doing 65 and above and the other are doing 50 and above, and they don't know if they're supposed to go, where they're supposed to go. So communication has got to be the key. We also have to, as I did last week, when I got my vaccination, we went on Facebook Live, and it wasn't just myself. It was the state commander, the senior vice, and the adjutant of the Department of Massachusetts. We all got our vaccinations and shared with the veteran community how easy it was, efficient it was, and then went back and said, hey, it's day 1, no side effects. Day 2, 0 side effects. So it's a communication there. It's also the stigma of the veterans that got more than their fair of shots while they were in the military. Some we knew what we got, some we didn't know what we were getting, and the effects that those are going to have. We're always going to have that little bit of hesitancy, but just as peer pressure is great, the more of us that get it, the more of us that'll want it. And I think that's going to be the key to get over that hump.
That's great. And I would note the VA in Connecticut is providing vaccinations to every veteran, literally every veteran, regardless of age, regardless of enrollment in the VA healthcare system. And I would suggest it's a model for the country, but your answer is very, very helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Representative Rosendale, I recognize you for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Takano and Chairman Tester, rankers, both Bost and Moran, for holding this hearing today, and all the veteran service organizations that are participating here today. I also want to thank every veteran that's online and listening to us as we hold this hearing for your service to our nation. Commander Roesch, I want to frame my question. It's 2 parts, and it's going to be about telemedicine, telehealth. We saw a tremendous expansion of telehealth and telemedicine during the pandemic period here. And what I'm trying to drill down into is how many folks of your members were utilizing this out of necessity because they were either tested positive for COVID or were had concerns about contracting COVID, and how many of your members were, and obviously you're not going to have exact numbers, but how many of your members were utilizing these services just because of the ease with which they've discovered that they could get the medical attention that they wanted, whether it was just for counseling or whether it was for actual medical treatment. And then in addition to that, I'm trying to figure out what policies do we need to make permanent and which ones have been overlooked that we need to implement so that we can fully utilize telehealth as we're seeing it as really a big benefit, especially to extremely rural states like Montana. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It's a pretty broad number, and as you said, we don't have specific numbers, but Mr. Gallucci's been working that almost every day through this entire pandemic, and I'd like to get his insight on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief, and thank you, Congressman Rosedale, for bringing attention to the issue of telehealth. What we learned during COVID-19 is that telehealth, we've often thought of it as a tool to better connect rural veterans, but VA was forced to connect everybody. Again, forced to innovate through COVID-19. What I'm excited to talk about is you asked about numbers of our members who have who have utilized telehealth during the pandemic. Our teams are working on launching another survey in the coming weeks that would better evaluate that. We've done a series of healthcare surveys over the years that talk about veterans' access to care, and we've added telehealth to that question. So hopefully in the near future, we'll have some quality data for you. But I'll tell you, I use telehealth myself throughout the pandemic. I know a number of veterans who have, especially when you don't need to physically be present with a doctor. But what I will tell you that we're very excited about are programs like Project Atlas. And we know that our inaugural Project Atlas site was in Eureka, Montana. VFW's leadership was able to go there to observe its opening, and we're proud to have seen a number of patients through Eureka who have seen very positive outcomes with being able to access telehealth from the VFW post. We've identified 5 pilot sites, and we expect all 5 of them to be operational within the coming months, thanks to our partners at Phillips and Department of Veterans Affairs. One of the important facets here is not, especially for highly rural veterans, they may not have broadband access, and that's where a hub like a VFW post can be incredibly helpful to making sure they have access to their care.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Colucci. And any additional information or obstacles that you find, if you could share with us, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Rosendale. Senator Tillis, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can, sir. We can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my compliments on the coordination of the committee. You guys do a great job. And Commander, it's great to see you, hear you. I was there to hear your opening statements. I want to get back to your focus on toxic exposures. Next week, I intend to reintroduce the TEAM Act, and I'm happy to report that Senator Hassan will be joining me on that as the lead co-sponsor. I believe that in many of the things that you listed as priorities, it's embodied in the TEAM Act. I appreciate the VFW for endorsing it. I understand that probably over the next week, we will get another signed letter of endorsement from your organization. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, if the record's going to be held open for a week, I would like to get consent to potentially have that letter submitted for the record if it comes before the record's closed for this hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
Commander, I also want to thank you for your service as VFW 4542 and Spring Lake Commander back in the day. I know you've moved north of the border. Maybe we can get you back sooner or later. But I look forward to working with you all. I think the TEAM Act, what I really want to talk about, I'm very hopeful. I want to thank Chairman Tester and Ranking Member, Ranking Member Moran for their support in moving the TEAM Act out of committee last year. I'm very optimistic that we can work together, maybe add some other provisions. But then I want to be forward thinking. You said something in your opening statements that I think is very important. This is going to provide, I think, a better baseline, but I still feel very strongly we need to work on capturing data and increasing our situational awareness and recording that information in the electronic health record of an active duty service member so that we could really get to a point to where we can predict when a service member transitions out of active status, we can predict the potential exposure and risk and potentially give them access to resources before any particular illness has been encountered. So after we make work and get the work done on the TEAM Act, I want to work with you all, the VFW and the TEAM Coalition, to figure out what we can do to even get more advanced in our thinking and hopefully more advanced in reducing the exposure to toxics on the battlefield or in connection with service. Is that something I can get your commitment on?
Absolutely.
Well, I thank you all for your service. I know we have a couple of other members here. I've been looking up at the screen because, Commander, I like you better on my 90-inch television. You're smiling big there. It's always good to see you, and thank you for your leadership, and thank all of you for your past and current and future service. God bless. I yield back.
Senator Tillis, I thank you for your kind words about our work at the committee. I now call on Representative Levin for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks for all of your work on behalf of veterans across our country. want to give a special shout out to VFW posts in Oceanside and Dana Point, California, in my district. They do an absolutely fantastic job serving our veterans. Commander, I have the honor to serve as chair of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, and I share several of the economic priorities that you offered in your testimony, such as creating a fourth administration at VA. I was thrilled to hear Senator Hassan mention our bicameral bipartisan efforts there. Overhauling the IT systems that deliver education benefits, and creating parity between active and reserve component education benefits. On that last item, I was glad to reintroduce the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act last week, along with Chairman Takano, Representative Palazzo, and Representative Mace. The need for parity is especially relevant right now as thousands of our National Guard remain deployed here at the Capitol. These troops are relying on a declaration of national emergency that President Bush signed after 9/11 almost 20 years ago in order to qualify for GI Bill benefits. And this is just one of many examples we've seen in recent years that demonstrate how the statute determining GI Bill eligibility hasn't kept up with the evolution of our military. So, Commander, I'd like to ask you, what changes have you seen in utilization of the reserve component change over time?
Well, we have integrated our Guard and Reserve into our active duty components to form a seamless team, and they are a little different than the active duty, and a lot of those are, as we say, have real lives outside of the military for most of the time, and we yank them out, we bring them in, and we say, this is your mission to do. And we don't give them all the benefits that we give the ones that are doing the exact same job every day. And that can't be. If we're going to ask them to do the job, we have to be able to give them the benefits that they deserve for doing that job.
Thanks, Commander. Can you speak to the impact that full benefit parity would have on our military readiness and how it would affect veterans themselves?
Sure, I would love to get into that, but Mr. Murray is my expert on that, and I can't bring him all the way down here and not get to say some words on that.
Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. Mr. Levin, thank you very much for bringing attention to that. We believe that full parity of benefits for every day that's served on active duty would help increase recruitment. We think that it would help bolster our reserve component. Our National Guard has been stretched very thin in the past 20 years. They've been asked to do a whole lot more than the traditional 2 days a month, 1 week a year. Our National Guard is performing incredible services all around this country, and they deserve to be honored with the benefits and care they deserve.
Thanks so much, Mr. Murray. We appreciate you very much, everyone, and I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Levin. Senator Manchin, I recognize you for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, and thank you, Commander Roesch, and everything that the veterans do for all of us, because West Virginia, as you know, is a highly populated veteran state. I like to say that we're one of the most patriotic states in the nation, but we really, really appreciate the services that you all give and watching over them. Sir, our brave service members deploy all around the world, often in harsh conditions, as you know. History has shown that even after surviving combat or hazardous duty, veterans come home having been exposed to toxicants that end up leading to long-term health issues. While we need to do everything we can to minimize exposure in the first place, there's no excuse for us delaying care and benefits for those exposed, which is why the Senator Sullivan and I have reintroduced the S-437, the Veterans Burns Pits Exposure Act of 2021. Sir, we sure could use a letter of support on that. We would hope that you all would use the weight of all of the veterans to support this piece of legislation because it's so needed.
We are on board and be happy to provide you with that.
Thank you, sir. And also, as you know, this is to all the witnesses there. As you know, the VA is making concerted efforts to expand telehealth initiatives and options. On one hand, I'm encouraged to see the VA provide more options for appointments, especially for veterans in West Virginia who have to travel some of our famously beautiful rural roads, mountainous roads, as we deal with COVID-19. However, I do have some concerns for 2 reasons. For one, telehealth appointments require broadband speeds of at least 25 megabytes per second. And that's just not there for many West Virginians in rural areas. And two, veterans are now having to adapt to a new online travel reimbursement process, which is a tough transition for some of our older veterans or those with limited access to broadband. So, in your assessment, what can the VA do to ensure telehealth is available to all veterans who prefer it? And how can we help our older veterans stay connected with the resources they expect, especially with travel?
I'd turn it over to Mr. Gallucci to answer that. He's been working that pretty diligently.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief, and thank you, Senator. This is a major issue that the VFW has been concerned about for quite some time. It's absolutely correct that once you're outside the DC metro area, you start to hit some broadband deserts. I'm very concerned. The VFW is very concerned that this is it has the opportunity, it has the potential to become a health equity issue, especially when you're talking about access to beneficiary travel. This is a concern that was recently brought up to us from our service officers in Arkansas, and, well, to be frank, from all around the country. And what we found is that the veterans who may need it the most are the least likely to be able to take advantage of the new online system. We can't be processing electronic claims in favor of claims that are processed, I guess, the old way, paper-based claims. We're very concerned that that's happening. And although online resources, telehealth, are a great tool, they are absolutely no supplement, especially for a veterans population that is generally older than the civilian population, more likely to live in a rural area that doesn't have broadband access. So you're going to need to find innovative ways to address that. We think one of them is a model like Project Atlas, which utilizes community hubs like VFW posts, where if veterans don't have broadband access in their homes, they can go to a hub to find broadband access to take advantage of those resources. The sites that we have up and running are very innovative. It's more than just like a phone consultation that you would have with a provider. They have things like blood pressure cuffs. They can check your vitals. They can check your body temperature and do much more via that video conference.
I think my chairman's getting a little bit antsy there, and I don't blame him. I'm going over our time, but we'd like to follow up with you in my office. And again, I want to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very sorry you'll back my time, and I want to thank and God bless every veteran for all they do and what they've done for us.
I appreciate that, Senator Manson. My body language was not about antsiness, but I do appreciate your courtesy.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. I understand. If not, my buddy John Tester would have jumped in anyway for you.
Well, I'm glad you're stopping speeches that go on too long, but it's a little veiled joke there.
That was good information.
Representative Rattlewagon, I recognize you for 3 minutes, and Talofa.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, Chairman Tester, and Ranking Members Moran and Bost for holding this series of hearings. I want to welcome the Commander-in-Chief. Each Congress, I look forward to hearing from our VSOs, and I appreciate the technical difficulties of setting this up as we recover from this pandemic. Thank you also to the VSOs for their testimony. Thank you all for your service to our great nation. I also want to thank VFW Hawaii, who has made it their mission to serve veterans, not just in Hawaii, but across the Pacific. Special wha'ataitele to American Samoa's very own Ingafo Maria Brown, Va'a, who always looks out for her fellow Samoan veterans, and George Barlett, who continues to give my staff regular VFW briefings. We're long overdue for an in-person meeting, and I look forward to hosting you and your fellow VFWs in my office later this year when it's safe to do so. I know that I can speak for everyone here this afternoon when I say that this entire committee on both sides of the aisle are fully dedicated to ensuring that the federal government lives up to our end of the bargain when it comes to providing the best resources and services to our veterans. The events of the past year and the COVID-19 pandemic have been unprecedented. However, I'm proud to say that Congress's response also has been unprecedented, with an overwhelming bipartisan response and record funding for VA programs. We're not quite out of the woods yet, and there are long-term effects to consider, but I'm confident that we'll continue to do everything we can to make sure our veterans are taken care of and that the negative impacts of COVID do not overshadow or interrupt the other care and benefits our veterans have rightfully earned. I also want to take a moment to reiterate my commitment to some of the specific priorities outlined by VFW and the other VSOs. Congress has an obligation to veterans who've been exposed to Agent Orange, burn pits, and other toxic exposures. I'll continue to support legislation that provides care for these veterans and protects the interests of future veterans who may be exposed to similar hazards while serving our country. I'm also committed to ensuring our female veterans are represented and cared for. In fact, I'll be participating in a subcommittee hearing later this afternoon on the gender-specific healthcare needs of female veterans. Finally, as a member who represents a U.S. territory, I'm particularly interested in your priorities for those veterans who live in either rural or remote locations, such as my home district of American Samoa. I want to thank the VFW and other VSOs for their efforts, and I do look forward to working with you on these and the many other issues facing today's veterans. Thank you again for being here today. Thank you for your service to our grateful nation. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Radewagen. And Commander, when I was joking with Senator Tester, I didn't mean to be offensive to you by talking about speeches going too long. But anyway, let's go on to Senator Sinema, who is Senator Sinema there for 3 minutes? Senator? She may not be. If not Senator Sinema, we'll move on to Representative Sablon. Representative Sablon, half a day.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's 81 degrees here in my district at just about 1:30. Good morning, Commander and colleagues. Thank you very much for your service and for all that you do to improve the lives of veterans and their families. I also want to give a shout out to the outstanding VFW auxiliary here in my district. Commander, your organization has been successful in getting veterans involved at the local and national levels and leveraging their numbers to increase VA benefits and services for all veterans. Here in my district, the Northern Mariana Islands and other underserved areas, veterans do not always benefit from implementation of recently added veterans benefits and services because of a lack of qualified VA staff and because of our geographic location, just like Ms. Radewagen's district in American Samoa. So since the Veterans of Foreign Wars is the only VSO with a presence here in my district, and since the VA does not yet provide an acceptable level of services to my veterans, I would like to ask, what can the VFW do to help veterans living in the Northern Marianas and other underserved areas that do not have access to the care and benefits they rightfully deserve?
That problem has become very, very high on our radar screen. We have taken steps to address that. And Mr. Gallucci has been at the forefront in developing our plan for that. And I'd like him to explain to you what we've been doing.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief. And Mr. Sablon, it's certainly something that the VFW is concerned about. Veterans in rural or highly remote areas not having equitable access to the benefits that they've earned. One of the small silver linings of the COVID-19 pandemic is that the VFW was forced to innovate in the way that we train advocates to help veterans access their benefits. Usually, the VFW is required by VA to host 40 hours of training for our accredited representatives, and we usually do that in person. COVID forced us to adapt using web conferencing technology and our online learning platform that we built with PsychArmor. We were able to host all of our training virtually this year. What that's allowed us to do is build out a curriculum that we can deliver really anytime, anywhere. And I think we're just about ready to do that. What we want to be able to do is reach advocates who may not be able to take advantage of that training so that they know how to properly help veterans access their benefits, and something we'd be eager to work with you for.
Well, that's amazing, especially for those of us who are so far away from, from the core center of government. I would like to, once you have that up and running, I would like very much to be able to have that and offer it to some of our veterans here who would like to help. But thank you very much for that. And Mr. Chairman, I think I'm out of time. Thank you, VFW, for all that you do, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Sablon. I now call on Representative Murphy for 3 minutes. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, other members of the committee, and thank you for all the VSOs that are present today. I'm deeply appreciative and respectful of the service that you've given to our nation, and I thank you. We've talked about some excellent issues today. I'm a physician and have been really pushing the study of this pandemic and the study of our vaccination efforts. I believe I'm heartened to hear how well you guys have taken up that mantle and are working towards getting our veterans, who are most of them oftentimes in the most at-risk populations. Until we get a majority of individuals vaccinated, we will not be able to get our freedom back, and that you guys have fought so much for. And so I'm deeply appreciative of your efforts. I also just will throw one other wrinkle in. I'm really appreciative of the advancements that you guys have made with telehealth. I worked very hard when I was in the legislature back in North Carolina to bring telehealth. I practice in a very rural area of Eastern North Carolina, and it is critical. Our veterans have had to travel hours to see a provider, and establishing telehealth as a means of being able to take care of those veterans is just so critical. I'm going to throw on one mantle here very quickly. PTSD and traumatic brain injury are something that are very, very important to me. I think we do a good job in the Veterans Administration of treating them, but I don't think we do a good enough job. I've sponsored Bill 1014 to look at hyperbaric oxygen therapy. As a scientist, as a physician, I've used hyperbaric oxygen therapy to help treat wounds. I believe that PTSD and TBI oftentimes comes from wounds, and I would like you guys to consider sponsoring that bill. The Fleet Reserve Association already has written a letter of support, basically to study this issue. We need to use every armament possible to help treat our veterans. When we're having 17 suicides a day, we're able to reach some of those with the present modalities and therapies, but at some point, these guys turn to a point of no return. There is nothing less for them. And at hyperbaric oxygen therapy, while not mainstream at this point in time, I have seen personally how it has turned some veterans' lives around. And I would ask that you consider this, supporting this measure in written form as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, I'll let you speak for that. We just have about 25 seconds.
I promise you we will take a look at it, as we will also take a look at anything that there is there to help our veterans. Everything's on the table. We will move that up in our priority and take a good look at that and get back with you on it.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that conversation. This is the least we can do for those men and women who have bravely served our nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Representative Dr. Murphy. I now call on Representative Cawthorn for 3 minutes. Representative Cawthorn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all to all of our witnesses who have come online. I really do appreciate you coming here. I'll jump straight into questions. I was curious, on a scale of, I really asked just 1 to 10, how would you rate the communication that your members have received from the VA regarding healthcare and benefits during the pandemic? And where do you think the VA can improve?
Well, on an overall scale of 1 to 10, probably around a 6, 7, mainly because of the biggest demographics that we have out there. They're not internet savvy. Not to say that none of them are, but we have a big group that are not. And that seems to be the mode that most of the information is coming out. We've relied a lot on getting the information to the VFW post, as other VSOs have, that are in the community as best we can, because we've been shut down. So the COVID has just put a complete stop, other than mailings and something going directly to their door. We've really put an emphasis on buddy checks, phone calls, knocking on doors, checking on them, getting the word out to them. It definitely flags a problem. Internet is great, Zoom is great, that aspect is great, but not everybody either has the bandwidth or even the computers to do it.
You know, that makes a lot of sense to me. I know my grandfather, he was served as a Marine. If I asked him to jump on a Zoom right now, there's a zero chance he'd be able to do that without me having to get my brother to go over to his house. But, you know, moving on, I just want to ask, how do you think the buddy check system's working for you all? Do you have enough people who are willing and able to go and do this? Is this normally from your younger members, or is this from volunteers? I'm just curious on that front.
It's a two-front program. One is we're just distributing our members list with phone numbers, and it's as simple as making phone calls. So even individuals who may not be so willing to go out into the world, if you will, to do that, can still reach out and connect with them. Other ones are going out into our communities, not just the VFW members, but veterans and just the older population and those that need something. We put together, and mainly, as you said, it's our younger members that did it, that weren't quite as skittish on the virus, to go out and get food and get supplies and get medicine and do whatever they need to help out.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. Hal, thank you very much for everything that you're doing for our veterans communities. They deserve the thanks of a grateful nation. So, Ranking Member Boston, Chairman Takano, thank you very much. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Representative Cawthorn. I now call on Senator Sinema for 3 minutes. Senator?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this hearing today. And Commander Roesch, I wanted to thank you and your team for participating today. This week, I was thrilled to announce the opening of a Project Atlas telehealth site in Wickenburg, Arizona. Our office worked with the American Legion to secure the site, and with the VFW, they've also been very important partners with the VA to bring Project Atlas to other states across the country. Project Atlas is just one of the efforts the VA is undertaking to expand telehealth capabilities to rural communities. What is the VFW learning from its participation in Project Atlas that could help inform these and other efforts to expand telehealth capabilities at the VA? And what are you hearing from your members about the Atlas sites?
Well, the first thing that we're learning is we're being able to get care to those veterans that may not have readily available access to it. I can tell you from experience, the Atlas sites at the VFW post, we have 2 up and running with 3 more just about to get there to finish up our phase 1, is been fantastic. Nothing but good things have been coming to us from it. We think it's something that needs to be expanded. We're going to be ready to jump in to phase 2. In not just the Atlas part of it, I mean, that gives a really comprehensive telehealth capability. But we also encourage the use of just plain Zoom meetings, telehealth in that way for their checkups, for their check-ins, to help them relieve some of the backlog, at the VA hospital, but get them the care that they need, answer their questions in a timely manner. We can never do away with the brick and mortar, face-to-face, in-depth care that they get at the VA.
I agree with you more, but I think this is a very innovative supplement for veterans who are living in remote areas, and particularly important during this during the time of the virus. To the next topic, I share your concerns about toxic exposures and airborne hazards, not just for those who've been exposed while deployed, but also for exposures while stateside. The Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma, Arizona has been deemed a U.S. Superfund site due to the dumping of fuels and solvents in open burn pits, which led to groundwater contamination. What steps need to be taken to make the support for exposures and related health issues a more proactive process for the veteran, where the Department of Defense acknowledges and notifies a veteran of exposure and then works with the VA to make sure the veteran is receiving regular health care to assess and support health conditions that could appear as a result of that exposure?
We realize that that is a problem. Mr. Gallucci has been working diligently on that, and I'd like to get his thoughts on that.
Thank you, Comrade Commander-in-Chief, and I'll be brief. This is the importance of the framework in making sure that an independent commission, once an exposure has been identified, can have the scientists start working on it, and then once the scientists make a determination, then VA is compelled to grant that as a service-connected benefit. As Commander-in-Chief Roesch had said before, we can't treat each time an exposure comes up as if it's the first time it's ever happened.
Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I see I've exceeded my time. Thank you for your indulgence, and thanks again to all of our VFW heroes who are here today.
Thank you, Senator Sinema. Thank you, Senator Sinema. I now call on Representative Frankel for 3 minutes. Representative Frankel?
Hello, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for calling me. This week I had a meeting with directors of student vet centers that are located at the various colleges throughout the country, and I'm just wondering if any of you have had any experience with these centers and if you had any comments about them.
We have had extensive experience with the Student Veterans of America. When they were first coming around, we opened up our VFW post for them to hold their meetings there. We've helped them with some of their legislation, and we continue to work hand in hand with them